Alright, so after about 66 hours played, about 200 deaths, and probably around 700,000 coupons spent on the highway robbery that is making repairs in this game, I think I can finally form an opinion about Stalker 2. But before I share this opinion, we need to get some context. At around this time last year, I became a pretty big Stalker fan after playing the original trilogy for a video, which you can watch here if you feel like it. It's a bit old and crusty, I was a bit awkward and wooden in the voice delivery, and the editing is utilitarian at best. But I still think it's worth a watch if you haven't played the originals, or don't plan on doing so. And as you probably know, the last Stalker game, Stalker Call of Pripyat, came out all the way back in 2009, and we haven't even sniffed another Stalker game until now. 15 years later in 2024. But shout out to the great modding scene for Stalker. Mods like Anomaly and Gamma have given these games incredibly long shelf lives and have sustained a strong community for over a decade and a half, despite how you stand on the tacticalification of Stalker. And in that time, the Ukrainian developer GSC Game World had dissolved, reformed a few years later, started work on Stalker 2, got their home country invaded by an extremely pissed off monkey and his even angrier goblin butler, had to move their studio to the Czech Republic to continue development without running the risk of their office building exploding, and even had some employees fight and die bravely protecting their country. So with this in mind, I'm willing to give Stalker 2 much more grace and patience on things like game stability, as well as bugs and glitches, and any other anomalous activity you run into in the zone, considering their more than unique development situation. But with that out of the way, let's not waste any more time, and I'll jump right into Stalker 2's main issues, as this game is far from perfect, and has some legitimate problems that need to be fixed for this game to fully reach its potential, and I believe this game is more than capable of becoming something incredibly special. But for now, this shit is rawer than leather. One of the main points of contention being GSC's decision to bury their old engine, the classic X-Ray engine, 6 feet underground and use the fancy new Unreal Engine 5, which gamers are not really happy about. And I understand. Using Unreal can have a lot of benefits. Working with a stable engine with huge amounts of documentation and experts can really help speed along the development process a good amount. Plus, UE5 can support some absolutely gorgeous graphics and lighting effects, and the studio gets to save plenty of time and money not having to build a new engine in-house. But using Unreal Engine is like trying to control a very large and beautiful horse, and with the right knowledge and skill, you can tame the horse and run like the wind. But if you aren't sure what you're doing, the horse may flip its shit and kick you in the face, and now you can only process the world every 4 seconds thanks to your brutal concussion. And playing Stalker 2 can feel like you have a concussion at times. Visual bugs are extremely common. Wall textures will occasionally tweak out and flash like Skiff just got skewered in the eye with a nail. Character animations will break, so characters will walk in place, shoot up from being seated or laying down in an instant, and sometimes they just get stuck in funny positions. And there's a pretty gnarly amount of model pop-in. Trees and other objects will materialize into existence as you travel over the hills and roads of the zone, making it seem like Skiff is hallucinating or something, on top of plenty of other small visual glitches, which thankfully never actually get in the way of the gameplay and interactions. But the game's serious tone can feel pretty goofy when the zone decides to make an NPC vanish before your very eyes like a magic trick. And on top of the visual bugs, there's just a general instability to the whole game's performance, and your frame rates will vary pretty wildly. That is, if your computer is strong enough to even run the game, as it seems a lot of PC players are getting filtered out by the pretty powerful hardware requirements. And I have a 4070 Super, and I had to play around with the settings to get a smooth experience after fiddling with the graphics and DLSS options. And out in most areas of the zone, I'd get anywhere from 100 to 144 FPS, which is all fine and good. But when in settlements with lots of NPCs and structures, my frame rate almost always took a hit. And during boss fights or high intensity moments, my frames seemingly went down into like the 20s, as the frame rate absolutely shit itself trying to render a boss fight and a massive structure collapsing in the background simultaneously. Which looked really cool, but I was literally in a slideshow for the entire scene. I thought my computer was self-immolating again, like when my CPU was overheating while playing Old World Blues. And it seems that these frame rate drops are due to the NPCs themselves, as apparently, each one is a walking frame nuke, which also means you'll run into some slowdowns during gunfights too, as you'll usually be dealing with anywhere from 3 to 8 enemies at a time in any given gunfight, which makes sense. Stalker's NPCs are one of the main features of the series, as theoretically, most NPCs who aren't nailed down to their post to trade with and to pick up quests from are supposed to be fully simulated people who can travel across the zone independently, shack up in or take over locations of interest, and point out things they see in the zone. And the player can even naturally run into and get into a fight with these living stalkers if factional beefs allow for it, or if the player is just an overall bloodthirsty demon. And this system is known as the A-Life system, and each Stalker game before this had used this system to some degree to populate the zone and make it really come to life, with Clear Sky being the most ambitious with it, offering up the faction war system for the player to get involved with, and you can track roving gangs of enemies, capture positions from them, and have the enemies and world constantly react to your actions, as the hostile factions would deploy attack squads to retake your positions and assault your new digs, with full reports available on each faction, their power in the region, and you're standing with them. And this brings me to Stalker 2's biggest problem that isn't visual bug or performance related, that being the simple fact that the new A-Life 2.0 for Stalker 2 is simply unfinished. There aren't any real meaningful interactions between the factions. There's no longer the Stalker social media with rankings and Stalker info, where they could send out messages to point out corpses, mutant movements, and artifacts they found, and so on. And also, Stalker NPCs won't travel out on their own. And most interactions out in the zone are based on pre-scripted events, rather than natural events, which works fine when reaching new locations, as you can usually find a small side quest to do, or some stalkers to help, or to kill. But the system really starts to break down when you realize that enemies are just spawning in nearby. And the game is masking the lack of a working A-Life system by just spawning in hostile stalkers while you aren't looking to populate POIs, or to bolster enemy forces during scripted encounters. One example, I entered this hillside ammo depot, which had nobody around it, and I went inside, tried to find the stash, couldn't reach it, and gave up and left. And when I turned back around, the location was now occupied by bandit thugs who had coalesced into existence when I had my back to them. Or when I was out here in Pripyat fighting monolithians, and I could see them spawning into existence to fight me. And there was a fuck ton of them too. The game really wanted my ass dead here. And thanks to the game's directional stealth meter, you'll know when enemies are literally spawning in behind you, as the arrow will swing behind you to let you know some thugs just appear right under your buns. Also, speaking of stealth, it also just doesn't really work. Enemies spot you incredibly easily, and their noticing meter never really burns down. But this is Stalker we're talking about, and it's not like stealth exactly worked in the previous games either. But at this point, don't even really bother with the stealth, unless it gets some pretty significant updates. And this lack of an A-Life system is pretty disappointing no matter how you slice it. And it makes Stalker 2's zone noticeably more static at times, and much more empty feeling than past games once you realize what's going on. Because previous games' NPC movements were anything but predictable, for better and worse. And this is probably due to how demanding NPCs are for the game to control and keep track of. And the frame rate would probably be in the single digits if the entire zone full of individual stalkers was being simulated. And these NPC performance issues would need to be resolved first before they could smoothly implement the A-Life system. And speaking of NPCs, their AI can be a problem spot for this game too. When they're hostile and in a fight, the NPCs are fine. They hit hard, but so do you. And the combat feels punchy and properly brutal. And it feels like a true Stalker shooting experience, albeit a bit more straightforward anomaly shooting than the classic SOC bullet spread, but it's still a rock-solid shooting system. However, sometimes battles just lose all their energy when enemies will seemingly lose all sense of sound, sight, and fear, and they'll just stand out in the open holding odd angles, looking at nothing. And other times, you might shoot up an entire room full of enemies, and then you'll enter the next room, which is full of non-moving enemies, who seem to be completely oblivious to the 80 loud bangs and screams of bloody murder going on one room over. Well, you snooze, you lose. Now, I won't pretend that the previous A-Life systems were flawless. Far from it, actually. I remember playing Clear Sky and having to start a brand new game because the game had essentially soft-locked itself after some friendly NPCs got stuck in the swamp church, and they refused to move to claim the last base no matter what I did. But a crusty system is still better than no system at all in this case, especially a system that's so integral to the Stalker experience. But I believe we will see fixes for this in the near future, perhaps as an expansion or as part of a larger DLC. Because Stalker 2, with a fully operational A-Life system, could be something real special. And the devs have acknowledged that A-Life isn't working as intended, and they do plan on fixing it. So that's at least a positive sign. Admitting is always the first step. But besides these NPC issues, a lot of the issues I had in the 1.0 release seem to have been fixed by the 1.02 and 1.03 updates. Merchant prices were made much better on veteran difficulty, and there seemed to be an overall performance update across the board. But I still ran into performance spots that were chugging like Badlands. Although these were some high population areas in the pretty huge Pripyat area, and the game will spawn in like 24 monolithians at a time in this damn city, so it's at least a bit understandable, I guess. But aside from the humans, I had a few issues with the mutants too, as despite their AI and designs being all well and good, The attack design and health pools of these mutants are a bit ridiculous at times. The chimeras and pseudo-giants are absolutely juiced in this game, being able to take several full magazines of ammo to the face and can eat more than a few explosions before they go down. And I think trying to fight the pseudo-giant 1v1 on veteran difficulty may literally be impossible without some insane RPG running and gunning like it's fucking Syria or something. The damn thing can run you down and combo you with an attack that knocks you off your feet, and then he can double tap you before you can even regain control of Skiff while he's climbing back up to his feet. And the chimeras are just as tanky. It can do this huge lightning fast lunge that obliterates your health. And this one chimera in the swamp was diving at me like I was getting attacked by a fucking glide bomb. And since mutants are huge bullet dumps who drop no loot, and buying ammo, especially on veteran, ain't cheap. Avoiding mutants is usually your best option, unless you want to lose all your coupons. And when I was forced to fight a pseudo-giant as part of a story mission, I actually had to jack down the difficulty to Stalker, or else I'd end up driving my fist through the computer monitor, and fighting these giants made me want to beat myself up. It was brutal. But the best strategy to kill these mutants hasn't changed from previous games though. If you see a mutant, immediately try to get to higher ground, whether that's a boulder, car, rusty barrel, railing, or any other decrepit structure, and take pot shots until the thing dies. But the devs are Stalker players too, and they know these tricks. So when you're out of reach, mutants will try and run and hide from you, so you have to maybe out-angle them, or hit them as they move around. Another problematic mutant I ran into were the Psy-Dogs, who actually have a pretty cool attack method. They spawn in psychic clones of themselves, who will puff into a cloud of psi particles when hit. So the idea is to thin the clone herd until you shoot a dog that doesn't disappear, and then light it up until it dies. However, they went way overboard with how many clones get spawned, and how quickly they spawn in. When you encounter a Psy-Dog, the dog will spawn in clones, and will also annoyingly teleport away, while continuing to summon clones. And the amount of clones he spawns is kind of ridiculous. After a few seconds, I have more than half a dozen dog clones ganking me, and the Psy-Dog just creates more clones if you destroy them. And yeah, I think that's enough psychic clones, guys. And these dogs aren't the easiest things in the world to hit, so you'll be spraying wildly, burning hundreds of coupons of ammo just trying to find the original dog. And no, there's no clear visual indicator that one dog is a fake and one is real. At least not one you can see clearly while you're panicking, trying to simultaneously thin the herd of dogs while watching out for new ones that spawn in. It's just a complete mess, and this dog needs a neutering like an overexcited puppy. No one dog should have so many psychic clones. And finally, there's one last mutant issue I ran into, which usually happen when fighting the bloodsuckers, and they let off their huge screech attack. And when they screech, I ran into this weird bug where Skiff will look around on his own, and you'll swing your view to the side uncontrollably, as if someone is holding my head and making me look to the right. And it's just weird as shit, and feels incredibly unnatural. Please fix. And based on my own experiences above, and testimony from other players, I knew these mutants with the resilience of an M2A2 Bradley would be a big problem going forward. So I took the liberty and went on over to the Nexus, and downloaded a mutant health balancing mod, made by Grok himself, the Gamma Mod guy, not the ChatGPT fork that Elon Musk uses to generate pictures of himself as a muscular, attractive, and tattooed man, as opposed to the pot-bellied, oversized toddler build, or whatever he's got going on in the real world. And I recommend you do the same if you want. Stalker 2 will probably have a lively modding scene, so take advantage to make your experience smoother and more fine-tuned to your personal preferences. A big part of Stalker's enjoyment comes from fine-tuning your optimal Stalker experience, and I had very little problems with the mutants outside of the forced pseudo-giant battle, and once I had the mod installed, mutant fights were much more enjoyable. Well, mostly. And that's pretty much all the explicitly bad things about Stalker 2. No A-Life 2.0, well at least not yet. Crusty at best, catastrophic at worst performance, enough visual bugs to make you think you're hallucinating, or maybe you suffered some kind of eye injury. NPCs are unoptimized and occasionally dumber than the metal their code exists on, and some gnarly mutant balancing that was designed by some evil entity of some sort. Stalker 2, at its core, still maintains that classic Stalker experience and game loop that we all know and love, and Stalker 2 really elevates the zone to newer heights in several ways. Plus, updates are coming out regularly, and this game is already on 1.03, so many of these issues I mentioned above may no longer even be problems in the future. So, let's move on to the good things, and starting off with the graphics. It looks great. The zone is incredibly detailed, the immersiveness of the zone is still here, and the anomalies look sweeter than ever, and at times, completely alien. And when you're going over a hill as the sun sets and hits that perfect warm glow, you could frame this shit. It's a work of art. And UE5 lighting effects showing us why GSC went with the engine in the first place. But that's not to say the lighting is perfect, however, as in the dark, it's hard to see enemies beyond a few meters, especially indoors, and your flashlight isn't all that powerful. So gunfights in dark corridors can get pretty miserable, as you get lit up and turned into Swiss cheese while you're trying to barely make out the outline of the enemies blasting you in the shadows. But besides the weak flashlight, the graphics and lighting are all pretty great, and you'll have plenty of awesome looking places to see and explore, as Stalker 2 has the largest Stalker map yet, and in my estimate, it's probably comfortably double the size of Shadow of Chernobyl's map, and is now a fully contiguous open world. No more load screens and staggered open areas. The zone is now fully open, baby. Welcome to the future. And we've got plenty of new places to explore, like the new Lesser Zone, Burnt Forest, the sweet-looking Duga Grid, Malachite, Wild Island, the Backwater, and the extremely out-of-place Circa facility. And even cut locations from the previous games have been given new life, like the Vehicle Graveyard and the Generators. And of course you have your classic Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl locations like the Cordon, the Garbage, Rostock, the Red Forest, and of course Pripyat. Clear Sky Swamp makes a return, and Jupiter, Yaniv, and Zayton are all back from Call of Pripyat. And going back and seeing how these old locations look now, and seeing how the former characters are doing, was a really enjoyable part of this game's exploration for me. We can see that Freedom now runs Rostock, and we can even enter the 100 Rads bar. Even the barkeep is here. But too bad the devs took all his guns after Shadow of Chernobyl. I miss my strapped-to-the-teeth barkeep. And Beard got kicked out of Skadovsk by Sultan, which is now known as Sultansk. But I mean, that's what you get for letting thugs plan on your downfall right in the open, right in front of you. And Duty now occupies a concrete plant, and the rookie village looks just as beautiful as the first time we met. And there are a ton of callbacks, cameos, and references to previous games all throughout the world and story quests, but I can't reveal those without going into spoiler territory, which I'll discuss in the story section later. And it all combines to make a rather girthy and pretty dense map, and you'll be doing a lot of exploring, as in classic Stalker fashion, you'll have to take a few extended hikes through the zone to get to new locations, and doing that classic Stalker stop-and-go sprinting, as I'll usually be slightly weighed down by my carry load, which really cripples your stamina regen if you're in the yellow, and if you're in the red, you won't even be able to sprint. So you'll be playing Zone Pack Mule Sim. But luckily, you can pick up energy drinks to chug if you need a stamina boost. And I had Skiff sprinting his ass off, chugging a non-stop energy, and then getting back to sprinting after being powered up by that caffeine in an instant. But if you don't want Skiff to get kidney stones, no worries. You can now drink bottled water to regen stamina too, and the water-derived stamina lasts longer than the energy drinks, which are pretty helpful on those Proclaimers sections of the game. And drinking these things, along with eating food and healing, I'll have some slick custom animations of Skiff downing an energy drink in one swig, or eating 2 bites of canned tuna and sausage to fill his entire belly. And it reminds me a lot of Gamma and Anomaly with the huge amount of custom animation packs in those mod packs. All we need is the ability to smoke a pack of Lucky Strikes, and we're good. Although, sometimes, the animation will seemingly misfire, and you'll press the hotkey, and Skiff will do the animation, but nothing will actually happen. You gotta try again to actually use the thing properly. And it's rare, but having a medkit misfire in the heat of battle was more than a bit annoying. But back to hiking, and you'll be doing a lot of it, as fast travel can only be done via guides to other settlements only, which are about the same as they were since Clear Sky, with settlements having merchants, technicians, guides, and a bed and a spot for your bottomless ender chest of a personal Stalker stash. And each settlement is run by a different faction, which can turn hostile depending on your story choices and game choices of whether or not to shoot up the entire settlement for shits and giggles. And you can even ally yourself with merchants by doing side quests for them. Although any benefits from making those trader icons green seem negligible. For example, I took a detour to the Cordon to meet up with my favorite fat-ass rookie scalper Sidorovich, and I did a quest for him. And afterwards, his icon turned green. But I didn't seem to get any better prices from the portly bastard. I guess he needs to spend the money he gets from ripping off rookies on those 4K Ultra HD chicken legs, which he actually chews on as an animation down in his bunker, which unironically made me very excited. Let's see if that fat bastard is down there eating a 12K Ultra HD chicken leg down there in dirt. There he is! There he is! Oh, he's glorious! What the fuck? Oh, he's eating the fucking 12K chicken! And this is how easy it is to please Stalker fans. And speaking of merchants, they're very much like the previous games. They all drive a pretty hard bargain, and each merchant has different inventories, so you have to make mental notes of which merchants sell what ammo types, so you don't waste time trying to remember who sells 5.56 and who sells 9x39. Otherwise, the merchants are just fine, and are actively getting better thanks to updates. Because merchants on veteran difficulty in 1.0, as prices are tied directly to your chosen difficulty, would absolutely jip you for artifacts. You'd pick up an artifact allegedly worth 7,000 coupons, only to sell it for like 1,800 coupons tops. Bruh. But following updates, you can make at least around 2,200 on veteran now. So that's a start. And to even get artifacts, you gotta go on some classic artifact hunts, which feels very similar to Call of Pripyat's artifact hunts. You head to an anomaly POI, pull out your detectors and screws, and get to work, dodging magical elemental death traps. And Stalker 2 has your classic electrical, flame, vortex, poison, and human-sucking ball anomalies. But we now have some new anomalies to avoid, like these lava-spewing anomalies, fart bubble anomalies, and glass shard anomalies that cut your shit up if you walk through them. And there's also some massive super anomalies like this massive tornado, or the cooling tower teleporter, and this huge orb anomaly near Rostock, and several others. There are these huge anomalous areas that are downright spectacular in visuals and scale, giving the zone a brand new sense of immense power. And you of course need your detector, which has a classic echo, bear, and the beastly Velez detector that shows you exactly where anomalies are too. But there's now a new stick-like Hilka detector, which also looks dope. And you gotta pull it out by pressing Q with this very convenient weapon wheel. Get close, and the artifact will appear, and just press F to scoop it up. And you can even inspect the artifact from your inventory. And all these artifacts look really alien and sweet, many of them pulsing and gesticulating as if they were alive. Freaky. And like previous games, they provide you with stat buffs at the cost of radiation leaking from your belt and into your nutsack, which are offset by radiation devouring artifacts. And these magic rocks can boost your carry weight, your endurance, your bleed resist, and so on. And they're broken up into tiers of 3. Minimum, medium, and maximum for simplicity. So it's essentially just 1 to 3. So make sure your radiation hits are offset by your radiation absorbing artifacts. And speaking of radiation and hazards, radiation is pretty much unchanged from previous games. Don't take on too many rads, avoid radiation hotspots, and if your rad bar fills up, you're dead. And to cleanse yourself, either take some anti-rad medicine, drink some Cossacks vodka, or crack open a cold one and drink that to cleanse yourself of cancer particles. Simple as. Side damage, however, has been overhauled quite a bit. In previous games, side damage could build up like radiation, and when you got your brain fried by psi waves, your vision would be all loopy, and you would constantly split into double images. And there was nothing you could do besides wait for your psi protection to slowly regenerate, which was incredibly annoying and boring. But now, psi beams won't hurt you directly, but will rather make Skiff feel a bit blurry and shaky. And even getting camera force pulled by controllers won't hurt you anymore, just essentially stunning you for a few seconds, which makes fighting these guys a lot less annoying, as they can grab you from even the slightest angles from some huge distances. Instead, when Skiff is getting his brain scorched, generic enemies will spawn in nearby and attack. And when you try to loot their bodies, their corpses will vanish into psychic mist. So I thought the game's fake A-Life system was acting up again. But nah, it's just Skiff fighting ghosts in his own head. And on paper, it's a cool new way to do the side damage that doesn't involve you just waiting around until you can see straight again. But I think these spawning hallucination enemies could appear a bit more gracefully, because I literally thought the game was broken the first few times I encountered this. But besides all that, the thing that surprised me the most about Stalker 2 was how much stash hunting there was, and just how enjoyable it is. Stalker 2 has far and away the best stash system in the series. Stash locations can be given out as quest objectives or rewards, and they can be found by looting dead stalkers and picking up notes and PDAs. And by just normally playing the game, you'll have plenty of Triforce icons to go and pilfer in no time. And these stashes can be as simple as a backpack tucked away in a nearby cranny, to being as convoluted as having to parkour across rotating helicopter blades, while dodging anomalies to reach a sack hanging from the tail rotor of a scrapped helicopter. And I've spent a ton of time just exploring ruined depots and buildings, just trying to solve the puzzle of the area and reach that juicy ass stash. Or I'll spend 15 minutes trying to parkour over crumbling brick walls and getting my cheeks turned inside out after getting sucked into those pesky ass anomalies, as well as looking for small keys and codes to get doors open. And the game doesn't hold your hand to find the solution either. You gotta scour some of these places to find what you need, or to find the path to access the cache, which may take you through several buildings just to figure out how to reach or unlock a cache. And I thought all the stash hunting was all pretty great stuff, giving you inherent motivation to explore the zone and really comb its POIs, as you never really know what you'll find in an old Stalker stash. Sure, it's probably just got 50 rounds of 5.56 and some Cossacks vodka, but you never know. There could be a sweet Vintar BC in there. Who knows? And besides all of that, I'm happy to report that Stalker 2 still maintains the core Stalker experience I came to love, and there's still a great sense of motivation to get new weapons and gear. Stacking up money by selling artifacts and gear is never not rewarding, and checking out locations both new and classic was a great time for me as a fan of the series. And the combat, when it's working and the AI isn't zoning out listening to the Monolith podcast in their minds, is brutal and intense, and delivers the quick and deadly gunfight Stalker is known for. And clipping dudes in the melon is never not satisfying. And when you land a headshot, you get this nasty but satisfying crunching sound to let you know that you're spraying some gray matter. And once dead, you can loot enemies for some Slavic diet staples of canned fish, lumpy sausage, condensed milk, and bread, along with usually a small handful of ammo, some bandages, which there are just way too many of in this game, by the way. I had spots where I was just running around with 100 plus bandages, just from looting corpses, which I usually just sell, as I never use them all, even if I wanted to. And by doing some searching, you can find plenty of medkits to heal instead, and I use bandages to seal up the occasional bleed only. You can also unload the ammo out of enemy weapons as a nice bonus feature, but you'd get way too rich picking up and selling enemy guns at settlements. So to fix this, enemies have the Stalker Gamma problem of their weapons working just fine when they're fighting you, but when you go to pick up their gun after killing them, it's in complete shambles, below 30% quality, is unsellable, it's caked in mutant and stalker shit, and it jams every 3 bullets. It's silly, but it's unfortunately a necessity for game balance. Moving on. There are also plenty of small side quests to run into, which feels similar to previous Stalker side jobs, which could be as simple as helping a Stalker kill a mutant, or a simple hit job, to ones that offer up some interesting choices. Just one example. There's a quest to find an Orthodox portrait in the anomalous poppy field that zonks you to death if you breathe in the fumes too much. And once you reach the poppy field, you can try to find the portrait yourself, or help a nearby stalker loot some bodies, and he'll give you the location of it. And once you grab it, you can either choose to return it to the quest giver for money, or give it to the opium stalker for a gun. And they seem simple, but they offer up some interesting choices to make throughout, and it feels like a continuation of the quest design in Call of Pripyat, which had an added emphasis on player choice. And that's just one quest of many. As in another quest, Cedar Roach will make you choose between killing some startup merchants, or killing his goons that he sends to wipe them out. And I haven't come close to doing all the side quests, so they'll keep you plenty busy. And Stalker 2 feels like the oblivion to Shadow of Chernobyl's Morrowind, and it even ditched the Morrowind-esque text window-based dialogue to a fully voiced dialogue system with a fully voiced protagonist, and it even zooms in on these beautifully Slavic characters' faces like in Oblivion. And luckily, there's no overly strict level scaling system here. In the zone, money is your experience, and weapons and armor are your progression, and it's just as it's always been in the series. But with that, I think we can move on to the main quest, and in classic Owen Kung fashion, I'll summarize the story for us all, but this time, with hopefully some more brevity, as the main quest, despite overall having a pretty interesting and widely encompassing story with multiple choices to make and endings to see that is deeply tied to the series' history and characters, the actual quest-to-quest activities can get pretty confusing and meandering, and I was constantly losing track of names of people I met, who I need to meet, and what I'm looking for, and why at any given moment. So I want to make this confusing snake of a main story make complete clear sense, as I'm someone who unironically enjoys the story of the Stalker games. Shadow of Chernobyl really captured my imagination in a unique way that made me extremely interested and fascinated by the story of psychic ghosts controlling the zone via mind control. And Stalker 2 expands on the world and lore of the zone to a huge degree. And we start the game as a man nicknamed Skiff, real name Yevhen Martinenko, a former Ukrainian Marine, as we learn from the insignia on his knife and some in-game dialogue mentioning he was in the military. And his name comes from a Ukrainian-made anti-tank missile system. Skiff wakes up to find his apartment half destroyed and in flames, with a strange glowing rock on the floor. This being an artifact from the zone itself that somehow made its way to Skiff's house and obliterated it, now making him completely homeless, as it seems he didn't have artifact insurance. And the impetus of this story being, what if Skiff found a mysterious rock? So, with no house and only a magical rock to his name, Skiff heads to the zone to figure out why this mysterious rock blew up his house, driving towards the zone in a truck, which is reminiscent of Shadow of Chernobyl's truck crash opening. And we hear on the radio an interview with Dr. Dahlin, the head of CIRCA, the Scientific Institute for the Research of the Chernobyl Anomalous Area, a new and very well-funded research institute that was established after Strelok linked up with Degtyaryov and shared his zone notes with the Ukrainian government after the end of Stalker Call of Pripyat. CIRCA also controls one of the new factions, the Wardens, or known simply as the Ward, a highly militarized faction that sort of takes the place of the Ukrainian military from the previous games, as I don't think it would be in good taste to get into gunfights with Ukrainian soldiers right about now, so I respect the change. Also, I'm playing with the Ukrainian dub with English subtitles, and I suggest you do the same for maximum immersion. Also, all the English voices are
got the best deals in the zone. Ask anyone. Guaranteed.
Awkward. So we pull up to the zone's border wall with a familiar face, Dr. Herman, the saucy scientist from Call of Pripyat, and he's got an interesting gizmo with him, something called the Scanner, a machine that can somehow charge artifacts, which can then generate anomalies on command. Because usually, when artifacts are taken out of the zone, they lose their anomalous energy and become inert over time, but Skiff's mysterious rock still holds its power. Curious. So we head inside the zone at this sweet looking part of the new zone wall, looking for some scientists to help us with this scanner doohickey, and we get our tutorial segment. Now, many people were pretty irritated with this intro sequence, saying that's too long, confusing, and gives players the wrong idea about how the game should work. But I didn't really have a problem with this intro much at all on my first playthrough. I mean, sure, it's a bit railroaded and a bit overlong, but for a first time playthrough, I had no issues with it at all, really. And I thought it hit on the game's basic mechanics just fine. Shooting, looting, inventory management, artifact hunting, it all seemed fine to me. But maybe since I burned so much time playing Stalker Anomaly in the original trilogy, I was already super familiar with all Stalker mechanics that could ever be possible. And it all just made sense to me immediately. But if I were to start another playthrough, an option to skip the intro would be greatly appreciated, as I assume most players, especially Stalker vets, would just want to be dropped right into the zone. But GSC has to onboard the rookies first. I understand. But once we perform our cool scans, we get pulled up on by a ward patrol, and since we're using their circa scanner tech in an unauthorized manner, we're in trouble. But luckily, we got a guardian angel, and a sniper in the nearby tower opens fire on the ward goons. Skiff using smoke and covering fire to re-grab the scanner in the chaos. And the dude moves with task and purpose here. He's definitely ex-military. And Herman tells us that one of our contacts, a man named Solder, had sold us and Herman out to the ward, causing this whole mess. But as we escape, we then get clotheslined by a stalker hiding behind a tree, who takes our scanner and politely knocks us out instead of shooting us. And he's accompanied by some very monolithian-looking goons. I recognize those Arctic camo pants anywhere. But we then get knocked out right into the title drop. When we wake up, we're getting our leg chewed on by a mutant dog, who we then kick into the dog obliterator anomaly. And we then meet a friendly fellow named Richter, a zone guide who seems oddly cheerful about the place, who teaches us how to use bolts and how to traverse and detect anomalies. Richter then points us towards Zalicia, a nearby settlement, to get our bearings, and to find info on our rat Solder. In Zalicia, we meet the settlement's leader, some old coot named the Gaffer, and we have a tense standoff with a ward captain, who wants to know who shot his men during the scanner debacle. And after helping out a stalker named Squint, we talk to Gaffer and Richter points us to check out a sweet-looking anomaly, where we can find a code that lets us into Solder's underground hideout, which is guarded by some Tushkano rats, who are kind of like the Flood in this game. The Tushkano move in packs and can overwhelm you quickly, but taking them out one by one is a pretty fun time. Just look for some raised cover and hop on to escape the rat flood. And once past some soldiers, we find Solder, who sticks us up. But Skiff hits him with a "is your refrigerator running" gag, and we stick him up after a wild scuffle. Solder then tells us that he knows as much as we do about the scanners, and he tells us to talk to a guy named Nestor in the garbage, as he apparently controls the black market scanner supplies. And you can then either choose to knock out or execute Solder, and I decided to knock him out because I'm just such a class act. And I believe that sparing him just makes him show up in a quest later, but I don't think I ever saw him again. So maybe I should have just iced the prick and been done with it. But on the way back, we get hit with an emission, which are back again, baby. But they're not super common, and they're nowhere near as annoying as they were in Clear Sky. And when an emission hits, just run to the closest marked shelter and wait it out. And the red glow from the emission outside looks really awesome and deadly, but besides that, there's not much else to say, really. And to find Nestor, we go on a bit of a wild goose chase throughout the garbage looking for him, until we have to speak with a bandit leader named Varan, who will tell us where Nestor is, if we do a task for him. He wants us to either take down a duty-backed thug lord named Roosevelt, or a freedom-backed thug lord named the Shah, in exchange for Nestor. But I say fuck that, and I decide it's Varan's time to meet his maker instead, so I wipe out his basic goons in a tough but fun firefight. And once Varan and his bandits are dead, I check his base's basement, and I finally find Nestor. Dead. Shit. Along with another body that's ominously named the Last One, a member of an unknown group of stalkers who had attacked Varan's men earlier and taken the scanner from him. And he has a suspicious PDA that we pick up for now. So we then head back to the garage slag heap, but when we arrive, the ward has taken over the place, and we then get to meet the leader of the ward itself, Colonel Korshinov, along with the head of Circa that we heard on the radio earlier, Dr. Dmitro Dalin. Dalin and Korshinov are extremely interested in how we were using the artifact with their scanner technology, and we punch this grunt in the balls when he tries to search me, but Dalin and Korshinov are impressed with how efficiently I beat up their goon, and they decide to try and work with Skiff. So I decide to show them the odd PDA found off the Last One, and Korshinov says that it's a monolith PDA, so it seems that monolith remnants are still out there in the zone. Although it's been over a decade since Strelok lit up the sea consciousness like a Christmas tree, and their control over the monolithians had long been severed. Korshinov points out the Wild Island area as the monolithian base, but Dahlan persuades him to not attack with the ward just yet, as he fears his precious scanner getting damaged in the fighting, which would cause a whole bunch of anomalous bull jive to happen if it got damaged. So Korshinov then tasks me with going to Wild Island and speaking to Strider, the former Monolithian buddy from Call of Pripyat that you could recruit to help you reach Pripyat. And he also gives us a ward badge, which will let us get past some ward guards when we need to. And on the way out, we run into Richter again, and he, as a zone lover, isn't too keen about the ward, who want to control the zone and ultimately destroy it. Whereas Richter has a sort of romantic fascination with the zone, thinking it to be a real living thing with feelings, and he wants to see it preserved. So he points us to head towards a sawmill to meet up with some other pro-zone stalkers. And when we arrive, we're greeted by Mercenary Scar. Yo, it's my favorite heavily armed hemophiliac. How's life been, buddy? Well, I'm glad to see that he survived that admission at the end of Clear Sky, but I guess it must have fried his brain a bit. As in Clear Sky, Scar comes off as a stoic, no-nonsense zone veteran who struggles with coagulation. But in Stalker 2, he's a bit, kookier.
Під час нової війни. І одного дня бам-бам-бам! До поля загинув першим. Булава намагався попередити. Сюди дивись! Але міг лише хрипіти. Дух та я намагалися тікати крізь цех. І тут другий штурмовий загін. Бам! Але змій мав для них гостин.
Scar is very theatrical and almost schizoid with his dramatic ramblings about his ideals in the zone, and he talks in this low, raspy voice. And Scar now leads a faction called Spark, a group of stalkers who want to kill off the ward, as they fear Circus testing and meddling with the zone could only end up being disastrous, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, just look how Project X ended up. And they believe in and are searching for an idealized version of the zone that they refer to as the Shining Zone, a zone full of wonders where death and violence aren't even a concept. They're a sort of Neo version of Clear Sky, but they have an almost religious reverence for the zone, rather than Clear Sky's purely scientific reverence. And I decide to not show Spark the PDA for now, and I move on towards Wild Island. And arriving there, we find it's the home of the Noontide faction, a faction of ex-Monolithians led by our guy Strider, who formed the faction to protect and gather his former Monolithian brothers, as ex-Monolithians aren't exactly popular with normal stalkers of the zone, who will often kill them in revenge for their days as brainwashed, stone-cold killers enthralled to a talking psychic rock. And not only that, ex-Monolithians are also emotionally stunted from their brains being fried by mind control, and they cannot remember any part of their lives prior to when Strelok killed the sea consciousness and severed their connection. So leaving the zone isn't really an option for an ex-Monolithian either, as the zone is all they have and have ever known. And we eventually find Strider after taking a look around the base, and we help him deactivate a scanner that's been generating anomalies nearby. And it seems someone is running around, stealing and planting scanners all over the zone. And we then find an inductor that can help us trace the Monolith PDA after some busy work. And then back at the Noontide base, we find Strider arguing with a mysterious man only known as Faust. And Faust apparently is the only Monolithian who can still remember the voice of the Monolith, and his eyes still have that glossed over Monolith look. And it seems that he wants to make Monolith great again, which flies against Strider's desire to start new lives away from the Monolith's control, despite the difficulties of restarting your life with no memories after being enthralled to a whispering rock for several years. And Faust is disgusted by the absolute state of Monolith, its men scared and lost, hiding from the zone out of fears of being killed by vengeful stalkers, barely scraping by, reminding the Noontiders that while under the Monolith's control, at least they had some purpose, and felt joy at being able to serve the Monolith. Despite this clear insubordination, Strider still accepts Faust and lets him go, as Faust had helped him establish Noontide, despite his recent want to return to Monolith. But Strider then gives us a sweet-ass rifle called the Lynx as a gift for all our help. Thanks, man. I'll put this to good use in about 40 hours or so. We then need to head to an azimuth station to install the funky inductor we picked up, and we run into an injured Monolithian, Foma, who reveals that he had been stealing and setting up scanners near the Noontide base under Faust's orders. As he agrees with Faust's perspective, and thinks Strider will just slowly lead the Noontiders to their sad demises as time goes on. So I pop his head for the trouble he caused us, and once the inductor is installed, Strider tells us that we can now listen to the last message sent from the Monolith PDA, and we find out that Faust was commanding these raiding Monolithians around, and we gotta head to a place called Icarus to find Faust's agent. At Icarus, we find that someone had planted a psi emitter in the basement, making all the ward guys here feel sick and nasty, and it seems that a ward lieutenant, a guy named Sterev, is Faust's mole. So we gotta go on a goose chase for Shteryev, even taking a quick trip down into the Snort Chasm from Call of Pripyat to follow his trail, which was a nice callback. And we eventually find Shteryev at Echo Station and try to give him some anti-psi pills, but he's so far gone off that monolith sauce, I have to put him down old Yeller style. And on his body, we find a message from Faust telling Shteryev to go to Clear Sky. Oh, I know exactly where that is. But for the sake of the quest, I'll pretend I don't, and I ask around the old ship bases of Zayton to find out how to reach Clear Sky's swamp base. We run into and talk to Richter again, who's a bit down in the dumps about getting some stalkers killed while guiding them around, and he now thinks the Zone is mad at him or something, thinking that he betrayed the Zone somehow. And he tells us to seek out a stalker named Nimble to learn the location of Clear Sky's base. And this is the same Nimble that you'd recognize as the only other stalker character, besides one other character I'll talk about later. His name rhymes with Big Cock, to appear in all 4 Stalker games. So we find Nimble blowing up Snorks in a cave, and we learn that Nimble had been the one to lead Faust and his guys right to us and our scanner at the beginning of the game. And we then get a choice to either kill or spare Nimble for inconveniencing us. But since he's a Stalker OG, I think that killing him will be a little disgraceful, so I let him go. He's not a bad dude deep down. And we get the location of Clear Sky from Nimble, and we then gotta run around the swamp turning off psi emitters before we can reach Clear Sky. Having us go to all the classic Clear Sky swamp locations was a cool time for me at least. There's tons of loving fan service in this game. But the biggest problem getting to the Clear Sky base is this damn chimera that power dives you in this swamp crossing area, and there's literally nothing I could do to kill it. Hiding in this house is pointless because it's a bullet sponge on veteran, and this fucker is way faster than you. So running past won't work either, but I was able to dodge it by wading in the water and hoping it didn't mount me from behind to give me mutant shots. And it was fucking rough, but I made it, and we finally reached the decrepit Clear Sky base. Memories. And in a basement, we hear Faust rattling off how random monolithians died, with a green holoprojector behind him, looking a lot like the sea consciousness representative hologram from the end of Shadow of Chernobyl. And he says nothing but happiness matters. And he knocks over the scanner next to him to escape, which incapacitates Skiff. But once we're back on our feet, the scanner is upright and fine, and Faust and the hologram are gone. The fuck? But no time to worry about that. And we finally take back our scanner and cool artifact inside of it for now, and get out of this damn swamp. Once out, we meet up with Scar and Strider, and Scar drops a truth nuke on us. He says that Circa had taken the Wish Granter, the massive magical wish-granting rock, which was actually just a mind control device, out of the CMPP sarcophagus and into the Circa facility. And if the Wish Granter is reactivated, the monolith could also possibly return. And we can't be having that. But luckily, we can use the scanner we just grabbed from Faust to get us into Circa, and we can investigate further from there, and set the place up for Strider and his men to bust in and turn off the Wish Granter for good. And we then get our location attacked by the Ward. But since I'm in the good graces of both sides for now, I just ignore the fighting and continue on like an enlightened centrist. And we then arrive at Circa, which is so clean and modern, it feels incredibly out of place. But I like the radical change in tone this place gives from the rest of the zone. The only problem is that the game is struggling to render this huge complex, and the lighting reflections and distant textures are so incredibly fuzzy, I feel like Skiff needs glasses or something. But the artifact museum in here is pretty sweet. We then hand over the scanner to Dallin, who is so jazzed to have his scanner back, he lets us sleep in his bed. Well, I've never gotten that as a reward in a game before, but okay, man.
Let me sleep in your bed.
And after our snooze in Dallin's comfy-ass bed, we meet up with him, and we learn that our house-destroying artifact is actually a special artifact known as the Alpha Artifact, a special artifact that can convert electrical energy into psi energy, and it doesn't lose its power outside of the zone. And it's the only way to connect to the generators, the true center of the zone that acts as its sort of heart, and it's where the emissions come from. And it's also where the sea consciousness was created. And fun fact, the generators were supposed to be in Shadow of Chernobyl as an endgame level, and it's explorable in some older game builds, but the area was ultimately cut and reduced to a cutscene. So we help Circa solve an anomaly problem. Someone set a bunch of zombies and mutants loose in the basement, you see, and we run back into Dr. Herman, who reveals that Circa is responsible for the anomaly blowing up our house, as they had tried to do some sort of experiment outside of the zone, only known as the Second Caribbean Experiment, as the first Caribbean experiment was the first time humanity had made contact with the noosphere, which also caused the Alpha Artifact to appear, but the experiment failed the second time around, Herman blaming Dallin for the failure, who forced the experiment forward despite the risks, which caused the anomalies and artifacts to start appearing outside of the zone, the Alpha Artifact farting our house down in the process. And once through a space anomaly, we gently confront Dallin about the Second Caribbean Experiment destroying our house. Korshinov then tells us the Second Caribbean Experiment had failed after Scar's men attacked the experiment, making shit go sideways. So it seems that both sides are to blame for the zone nuking Skiff's house. Dallin then reveals that he has the Wish Granter itself set up in the next room, and he says that all we need to get it up and running again is the Alpha artifact, and if it works, then we know that the artifact can be used to link with the generators. But since the rock destroyed our house, we get to test it on the Wish Granter, which we do so by interacting with these Strelok ghosts. In doing so, we reenact Strelok's endgame wishes from Shadow of Chernobyl, the humanity must be controlled ending, and the I wish for the zone to disappear ending. And you even do that long face rub that Strelok does before he asks for the zone to disappear from the first person perspective, before seeing a beautiful meadow and then going blind to make the zone technically disappear. And we then get attacked by the ward on Korshanov's orders. And this fight is pretty damn crusty, as these ward guys attack from all angles in this huge room, and you don't have much cover, and you gotta wait it out until the game stops the assault and snaps you back to reality. So to win, I had to run up the stairs before the NPCs even turned hostile, and I just hid in the most fortified corner until the battle was over. If this section just had a few less ward thugs, it wouldn't be so crusty. But right now, it's a total gank. But once it's done, we wake up and realize that the ward attack was all just a dream. So it looks like our artifact does indeed work. Skiff was fucking geeking. Dallin then tells us that Circa and the ward's plans bluntly. They want to use the artifact to connect to the generators, and then destroy the zone, and then harness the anomalous energy of the zone in the noosphere to make incredible scientific breakthroughs. And we then meet with Agatha, a mysterious woman who seems to outrank even Dallin at Circa. So Dallin might be head scientist, but this lady is the clear boss dog around here, who reveals Herman had helped Foss steal scanners from Circa. And then Agatha lets us choose to kill or spare him for causing us so much scanner shit. But I let him live, as he gave me some good prices on artifacts in Call of Pripyat, and I can't kill my favorite blue-stealing scientists right now. Herman then scampers off, and then Agatha doxes Skiff by revealing all his info, and it's kind of wild that he's the same age as me at 25. I'd last 47 seconds in the zone before crashing out and getting my anus inverted by an anomaly if it were a real place. Skiff's a better man than me. And we can then choose to tell her that Noontide will try and sabotage their experiment, but I keep my mouth shut for now. Trying to control the zone via science hasn't exactly been a winning strategy so far. But Agatha knows that Strider is on his way anyways, so we go to meet him and his buddies. And then we meet some Noontiders in the basement, and I decide to help the ex-Monolithians try to shut this shit down. So we kill a few warders, link up with Strider, and break into the experiment chamber, which we fail to stop. And once it starts, we hear the voice of the monolith. Oh shit, it's back. And Strider tries to off himself with a rifle in one brutal last-ditch attempt to escape the monolith's control. But it's too late, and he falls back under the monolith's influence, the experiment reestablishing its connection to the zone somehow. And Strider takes the artifact and leaves, and we fall into the water below and escape Circa, fighting Ward and newly brainwashed Monolithians to escape. And we get out with some help from our buddy Richter, but we then get attacked by Monolithians, and we have a sick fight with this bald dude, casually taking a knife to the shoulder in the process. Ouch! But it's chill. You should see the other guy. But shit. The experiment failed, and the monolith was brought back to life in a huge way. All the ex-Monolithians were re-brainwashed, as their brains were extremely vulnerable to monolith mind control, and now hyper-violent gangs of emotionless killers are now all over the zone. But we don't know if it's Faust controlling them, or the sea consciousness is still out there somehow. But for now, this ends up causing huge problems. And even Zalicia gets attacked by monolith goons, who we can help fend off. And this started a whole minor questline that was pretty interesting, as we fight off monolith, round up the survivors, go investigate and kill a recently turned Monolithian, a dude named Uncle Leonia, and then prepare Zalicia for further attacks and fight even more Monolithian goons, which is all pretty enjoyable, as the Monolithian threat feels very real at this point, and the quest was deeper than I expected. But for some reason, once I completed the quests and left Zalicia, Gaffer then came on the radio not long after to tell me despite all the work I did, Zalicia fell anyway? The fuck? All that work for nothing? But I think this is a well-known glitch, so devs, please fix. We then link back up with Scar, who gives us a dramatic retelling of his past with the Ward, who killed his original Spark crew. And Scar says that they sabotaged the second Caribbean experiment because they believe that the experiment would have caused the zone to become like, quote, Cold Island, a place that's unavailable in the base game. But I assume it would have made the zone inhospitable for any life. Scar also tells us about his new plan to attack the Duga, that sweet-looking radar wall area, and take control of it from the Monolith forces. So we attack with Scar and Spark, slaying Monolithian goons just like old times. And we run into Faust, but taking him down won't be easy, He seemingly can spawn psi clones of himself, and he can even do a controller camera force pull to stun Skiff. The dude is a human with the powers of a controller and a psi dog, so we have no choice but to retreat for now. So to beat Faust, we have to get some psi protection to negate his mutant powers. So we go on a bit of an extended goose chase, helping a drunken scientist get the needed psi protection, and taking a trip down memory lane by exploring the Agroprom underground, and stopping by Strelok's old base. And once we're all set, we link up with Scar's second in command, Star, for round 2 of the Duga offensive. And after another monolith massacre, we finally get our frame rate destroying fight with Faust. And this fight is a total clusterfuck, by the way. Faust still spawns his clones in, who will swarm in all around you, and he still pulls on you like a controller, which is annoying as shit, as it completely fucks up your aim. So you have to either flee and hide, or spray and pray until your brain recovers from the injection of 3,000 hours of funk blasted right into the cerebral cortex. Faust also has this glowing generator thing at his hip they have to shoot to destroy, and it'll slowly turn from blue to red to denote how damaged it is. But it stays on the red section for a long ass time, and I wasn't sure if my bullets were doing any damage or not at that point. And they do. The game just trolls you by making the red damage last extra long for some reason. Coupled with the performance issues, this is probably the worst part of the game for me personally. It's just a complete choppy mess of a fight, and you're completely swarmed throughout the entirety of it. But once I finally break his shitty belt generator, we get teleported to the top of the Duga, and take a seat with Faust, whose eyes no longer have that monolithian glossed over look to him. Faust tells us that he wants all stalkers to experience true joy and happiness, and he shows us this crazy shadow realm of the zone, where humans are now ghosts lit up by their glowing veins, and similar vein-looking strands and arcs of energy flow in all directions. And is this the shining zone Scar is talking about? Is this the zone's true form? The noosphere itself? Who knows? All Faust says is that this is how he sees the zone, and he seems to be tapped into the zone's very nervous system, if the zone even has one. And we then wake up and loot his corpse for his crystal pendant. And then Scar calls us up to meet him at the Malachite facility, as he's got a little surprise for us. And using Faust's pendant, we conjure up the representative of the Sea Consciousness, who you'd remember as the creators of the Mutants, X-Labs, the Brain Scorcher, and the Wish Granter, who tried to interface with the noosphere, but fucked up and caused the zone to appear, kicking off the events of the entire series. But how? Last time we talked with these guys, Strelok made sure they'd be shut up for good. But here they are, speaking to us. It seems that Strelok did kill their bodies in the X7 lab, and severed their connection to the zone. But the Sea Consciousness survived within the noosphere itself, by becoming something known as subtle matter, essentially keeping their consciousness alive and well, just within the noosphere only. And thanks to Dahlon's experiment, they now have control over the monolithians again, although the noosphere itself was fractured in the process. And now, the Sea Consciousness has a new plan to bring everyone under their control, so all humanity can become subtle matter as well, and now everyone can live in harmony, without strife or disagreement or pain, ever again, as a psychic ghost within the noosphere, and Scar is loving it, and he wants to usher in the age of the Shining Zone as soon as possible, showing an almost fanatical devotion to the big green head man. But right then, the ward attacks, so we shoot our way out through them and escape. And once clear of the ward, we relink with Scar, who says that we need to reach the center of the zone so we can recontact the Sea Consciousness. But nobody knows how to actually reach the zone's center, except for one man. You know who. The marked one, the original protagonist, Strelok himself. And there have been rumors that the legendary stalker Strelok had returned to the zone. But tracking him down won't be an easy task, and Scar knows how hard that is. He spent the whole damn game doing it. And it seems the only way to find Strelok would be to find his old friend the Doctor, the guy Strelok spoke to in the Shadow Chernobyl cutscenes, and the guy who tells us that the Wish Granter is phony, and tells us where to find the Pripyat stash to unlock the true ending in Shadow of Chernobyl. And after another not too important goose chase for the Doctor involving some mercs hunting the Doc, we can find him in his home in this awesome looking bubble anomaly in the Red Forest, a huge upgrade from the literal hole in the ground he lived in Anomaly. Once inside the bubble, we find the Doctor with an injured Strider. Well, maybe he's fine. The dude shot right up. Oh, wait, never mind. He's still hurt. And it seems that Strider forced his way here, hoping the old Zone Doctor could save him. Or maybe he's here to kill him. Who knows? But the Doctor won't tell us anything until we help him help Strider. And to do that, we need to steal a monolithian regenerator machine to help him. A special device that can quickly heal monolith members through psychic healing waves or something. The doc also gives you an optional objective to not kill any monolithians and to sneak through the place instead. But the stealth system in Stalker 2, like I mentioned, is not quite there, to say the least. So monolithians must die mode it is. And when we return, we find Strider choking out the Doctor, which causes a scuffle. And Strider is an absolute Terminator here. Nothing can stop him. And he almost chokes out Skiff until the Doctor skewers Strider's neck, killing him. Bruh, Poor Strider. He got jobbed so badly in Stalker 2. All that work to help Noontide and reestablish their lives, all that shit he went through in Call of Pripyat just to give us a helping hand, and all those years spent trying to reclaim his life. For naught. Killed while enthralled to the monolith. The Doctor then drops a lore nuke on us, and he reveals that he was one of the original Project X scientists, and was even poised to hop in one of those pods and join his mind with the rest of the C consciousness, but he decided against it at the last moment, and he reveals his true name as Dr. Kamenov. And we tell Kamenov that his former colleagues are still alive in the noosphere, existing as subtle matter psychic ghosts, and he also reveals that the C consciousness representative is none other than Dr. Dahlon's father himself. And our next step is to get to the Orbita underground lab and get a special cartridge from the X3 lab near the Cordon. So we get some info from Old Sid after a quick side quest for him, and we reach the X3 lab with the help of a stalker named Dark, who we saved from some mercs. And we bust into the place, fight off some mutants, and get forced into a boss battle with a pseudo-giant like I mentioned earlier. And I turned down the difficulty from Veteran to Stalker here, as I was not going to deal with the unkillable bullet sponge that can outrun you on Veteran, and Dark is barely any help against this meaty fucker, and he usually ended up shooting me more than the mutant. Fucking prick. But once it's dead, we move on to the next room, which is full of brainwashing TVs that make Dark convulse like a man possessed, due to the wobble. And we soon get jumped by none other than Strelok himself. Whoa, what's up, Strelok? How's that widow's peak? Stark as ever. Beautiful. He even holds up a classic Kill the Strelok PDA, which Dark had on him. You see, Dark was a Stalker agent this whole time. The same thing that happened to Strelok between Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat. If a Stalker reached the center of the zone and wasn't killed or turned into a monolithian, they'd be recruited into the Stalker program, where they'd be brainwashed and then sent back out into the zone with a directive programmed directly into their brain, acting as sleeper agents for the C consciousness, who carried out their operations in secret. Also, in my original video, I got baited into thinking Stalker was an acronym for whatever it was, and it's not. And as far as we know, the true meaning of the Stalker title acronym is still unknown. Strelok says that he wants the zone to be left alone, and Ward and Spark are just two sides of the same coin, looking to control the zone to their own ends. And we tell Strelok that we talk to C consciousness, but he thinks that C consciousness is just an illusion, an afterimage of what they used to be. And we then enter a beautiful flowery meadow, this appearing to be the shining zone Scar wants to find. But once we take a cartridge out of this doohickey here, the oasis completely vanishes, revealing the shittier reality of the place. And it seems that the shining zone is just an illusion. The very same illusion that Strelok experienced in the true ending of Shadow of Chernobyl, where he takes a nap in an idyllic field of grass and flowers after lighting up the sea consciousness. But it's all a machine-generated fake. But with the cartridge, we can head to Orbita, kill some basement burrs along the way, and set up the cartridge, and enter a sea consciousness pod of some kind. And we then see and speak to Strider in the spirit realm or something. And we tell him that he's dead, and that we failed to stop the experiment. And all his men are brainwashed slaves and killers again, which Strider finds hilariously sad. And he then tells Skiff about the bullet necklace that he's been wearing for the entire game. And it's from a bullet that he fired at a soldier attacking the CNPP, the day Strelok shot up the C consciousness and broke their control over the Monolithians. Strider was on the roof, sniping the attacking military, who stormed the CNPP at the end of Shadow of Chernobyl. I remember those annoying-ass helicopters that you had to run away from at the final push to the CNPP. Strider's Monolithian control broke during the fight, and he awoke to find himself in a battle he didn't understand, shooting a man he didn't know. So he kept the shell casing as a beacon of hope, a hope that he will never be controlled again by the monolith, hope that the man that he had shot survived, and hope that his brothers will have a future. But he failed, and he died, and he throws his bullet casing away, laughing at his own failure. Damn, I feel so bad for the poor guy. And there's 4 unique variations of this conversation, but they all end in the exact same spot. Strider is gone, and his men are slaves again, and Dude got absolutely shafted at the bitter end. Rest in peace, Strider. But when we come to, we find Scar and the Sparkers have entered the chamber, who let us out and ask what we saw. And here we can make another choice. And I decide to side with Strelok and tell Scar that the Shining Zone ain't shit. It's just an illusion at best and a mind prison at worst. And the Strelok icon is his face in Widow's Peak. Sensational. But my rejection of the Shining Zone does not go over well with Scar, who locks Skiff in the pod and puts him in non-believer timeout. But Skiff uses his immense incel strength to bust out of the pod, and we get a call from Strelok to head to the Troposphere Comm Center next. And after killing some Ward goons to get inside, we find this creepy brainwashing chair and take a seat in front of those psychic TVs. And on the screen, we can see Strelok through the eyes of Dark, and he's even got some jokes for us.
Привіт, Скіф. Це я, Темний. Пам'ятаєш, як я хотів убити стрільця? Я передумав.
Як це, бляха, можливо?
So not only can sea consciousness control the stalkers, they can also see through their eyes, making these stalkers not only agents, but a living surveillance system. And on the way out, we run into Korshinov in the ward again, where Korshinov reminds us that Scar and Strelok both have been recruited into the Stalker program in the past, and he believes that both still work for the sea consciousness on some level. And the ward wants to access the Stalker program to find and eliminate any Stalkers that are still out there. And here we can make one last choice to side with or against the ward. And choosing to join them here locks him into their side of the ending. And for this playthrough, I wanted to go with my guy Strelok, so I flee from the ward using a smokescreen, but Korshinov clocks Skiff in the face, and we get taken to ward prison at the chemical plant, where we are woken up by Dr. Dahlin, who reveals that he knows Richter, who used to work at Circa, but he left to explore and try to understand the zone that he's so fascinated with. And Dahlin wants to speak to his psychic ghost father, as he wants to see subtle matter for himself, and see if there is indeed life to be had in the noosphere, or if the sea consciousness we saw was just a psi imprint, a sort of soulless copy of their consciousness, forever trapped within the noosphere. Dahlin then slides us a key and lets us out, and tells us that he's on our side, and to call upon him later. And we then head to Pripyat, as the Pripyat Underground contains the Stalker Program Control Center, called the Foundation, which we can reach via Yanev Station. And when we get there, we have a chat with Richter up in that house you drink with that duty dude in Call of Pripyat, where we discuss the Heart of Chernobyl. Hey, that's the name of the game. And get some directions to find a stalker named Spirit. And we try to cheer Richter up a bit. He's still going through some relationship issues with the zone, you see. He thinks it's still mad at him. So we tell him to lock in and keep going. And don't give up. The zone hates quitters. And we soon clear away to Pripyat after getting a scanner and clearing an anomaly-infested tunnel with it, which is under that giant tornado anomaly. And once we reach Pripyat, which again feels huge and just as dangerous as ever, we fight off a small village worth of monolithians, and we link up with Degtyarev. Yo, what's up, Deggy? Oh, and Richter's here too, of course. Strelok, Scar, and Deggy are all here. Some crazy protagonistception here. And as a fan of the original trilogy, they're spoiling me with all these past me's. Deggy is here leading his own new faction called the Corp, a group of highly skilled military types who patrol Pripyat and protect the pass to the Ghost City. And it seems he's been operating here for the past decade. I guess Deggy is still here in that Call of Pripyat. But before we get underground, we need to do a few quick tasks for Degtyarev. And be careful out there. This place is huge and imposing, and it's properly dangerous, and is full of powerful mutants and hordes of infinitely spawning monolithians. So be careful. And once Deggy's chores are done, we can speak to him to get underground and reach the Foundation. And this is the point of no return in the game. And the game will end once you complete this final stretch. So there's no going back, and all side quests are cancelled. But we press on for the final stretch of the game's story. And the underground is full of sweet leaf-dropping anomalies, and a controller in a far window who just loves force-pulling you from a mile away. But we then enter the heart of the Foundation with Degtyarev, where Dahlin and Korshinov are bickering, which has this sweet gyroscope doohickey in the center of the room. And we have to scrap with Colonel Korshinov to settle this shit for good. And if you chose the ward, you gotta fight Richter here instead. And Korshinov is equipped with a beast, literally, of an RPM. And he also has some sort of force field built into his exosuit that lets him take plenty of bullets to the face and balls, which you have to rack up damage on until Korshinov's force field breaks, and he gets stunned, and he jumps onto one of those vent things, where we can then throw hands with the Colonel, and he then calls in some ward goons to shoot at you from up on high, but just take him down and break the Colonel's force field again to win. And to beat him, I dug out Strider's Lynx rifle that he gave me, and I cleaned it up, and I used it to avenge my favorite deadpan buddy Strider, who was just gone way too soon. And this thing is huge in killing those faraway enemies and racking up damage on Korshinov quickly. And it's a pretty tough, but pretty satisfying fight that doesn't absolutely nuke your FPS for once. And once we melee him again, Deggy comes in with the Captain Price save, and he gives Skiff an opening to shoot Korshi right in the chin. But Deggy's real tired after that fight. He can't even move. We then return to Dahlin, and we fire up the Foundation using Faust's Pennant, and we summon the sea consciousness version of Dahlin's old man, who just repeats the same exact thing he said to Strelok in Shadow of Chernobyl, like he's just a recording or something. So to test if the representative is truly alive, Dahlin asks his pops a question only he'd know the answer to, that being, what's the true rule of scientists? And the answer to that is to celebrate Science Miss. But his father's green ghost just keeps talking like he's a pre-recorded message, which sends Dahlin into a rage, convinced that subtle matter is not true life, and he destroys the Foundation centrifuge thing by throwing a massive battery into it, which causes the thing to blow up, which knocks both Skiff and Dahlin unconscious, and Dahlin disappears from the story after this explosion. So, thanks for all your help, man. And I hope you, didn't die from that. But we then wake up in a shack with Strelok and Richter, and it seems that Deggy had saved us after the explosion, but he went back to Pripyat. He still hears the call. We destroyed the Stalker control center, but it seems that the zone is destabilizing rapidly. Emissions are becoming much more frequent, and the whole zone is shifting around. And then Strelok then says that we have one last loose end to tie up, that being the good doctor and Strelok's old teammate, Kamenov. And it seems that Kamenov and Strelok no longer see eye to eye on the zone. Strelok wanting to preserve its current form, while Kamenov seemingly wants the zone to be, quote, for everyone, which Strelok doesn't seem to like the idea of. Strelok then asks Skiff to kill Kamenov for him. Damn, stone cold for Strelok to have to do it to his old buddy. And it really does make you question his motives and what his true plans might be if he can so callously command the death of his old friend like that. But for this playthrough, I want to see Strelok shine, so I agree to clip the dock, and Richter leads us to his bubble house, despite the zone's volatility. Seems he made up with the zone. And so we meet the doctor again at his sweet anomaly house, where Kamenov talks about how the zone is used and abused by men, saying that it's time to show the zone some compassion, and he says that he wants the zone to be set fully free and accept whatever the results of that might be. Whether that's a zone free of the cruelty of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, or it's just as dangerous everywhere, we can then choose to either shoot or spare the doc. And I can't say no to that widow speak, so sorry Doc, who dies after a small shot to the flank, and his death triggers an emission, and we run into his house and get woken up by Richter, who is going to take us to the Red Fortress so we can relink with Strelok. But we have to shoot through an army of monolithian goons guarding the place. But not to worry, because the game gives us a sick Dnipro rifle that's been blinged out with attachments, which made this fight way more fun for me. Lasering these monolith geeks to death was awesome. And once cleared, we meet with Strelok on the roof, and we tell him that the doctor is now past tense, which pleases him. And Strelok says that he had been reborn in the zone and feels a duty to protect it, and we will help him. And he then summons a portal from his iPad, and we take it to head to the generators in the X7 lab, the one with all the sea consciousness pods, where all this zone shit even started. And after destroying some more monolith, we enter the brainwashing hall from the end of Clear Sky, the hallway where stalkers who were lucky enough to reach the center of the zone were kidnapped to and brainwashed into the stalker program. And we run into Scar again, who talks for a skeleton with some more theatrics.
Його жарти, витівки, куплети.
Прошу, Skiff.
And on a screen he shows us, we can see that Scar had been implanted with the memories of a stalker named Marshall. So his brainwashing, plus all those emissions he took to the face in Clear Sky, Scar's brain is probably a liquid by now. But Scar starts realizing that if the sea consciousness is just a soulless copy of a person, then life can't exist after death, and the Shining Zone is nothing but a dream. So all those sparkers died for nothing, which Scar can't accept, and he throws a head at us and flees, kicking off another boss battle with the old merc. And this is another interesting boss battle. Scar has a special Gauss rifle that can do huge amounts of damage, and Scar has some anomalous force field around him that makes him immune to bullets. So to defeat him, you have to make him walk into the 3 parts of the room, and once he's inside, turn on the brainwasher TVs with a big red button, which will stun Scar thanks to his stalker programming, where you can then light him up and actually make it hurt. But once you do, all the TVs will explode, nuking your frame rate momentarily, so just be ready for that. But repeat this 3 times, and we put down Scar for good. And it's a bittersweet feeling though. I hate protagonist on protagonist violence. Although, was this truly Scar? If this was the Scar I know, this fight would have been super easy, as you would have just had to shoot him once or twice, and then he'd just bleed out after a few seconds. And it's a simple, but cool fight, and I really liked using the brainwasher TVs to fry his brain. But once he's dead, we can take Scar's custom Gauss rifle, which is kind of ridiculously OP, as it can hold 99 rounds of Gauss blast, making it so you never have to reload the damn thing. But the game then makes the Gauss rifle pretty much irrelevant, as we now have to fight against Granite to make the final push to X7. And Granite are an elite unit of monolithian thugs who guard the X7 lab, who have been guarding the place before even the zone was created, and Korshinov had belonged to Granite as well, but he had escaped monolith control when the experiment went south. And these Granite guys are no joke. They make that insane Gauss rifle almost irrelevant, as these guys have some sort of anomalous super armor on them that deflects your first few shots off of them for no damage. So even a fully charged Gauss rifle blast to the face gives them no damage on the first few hits, and you have to land several hits before breaking their armor and you can actually kill them. But this Gauss rifle thing doesn't exactly believe in the concept of a normal fire rate. So back to Deggy's Dnipro it is. And this game is really busting your nuts here. It's the hardest gunfight in the game, and these guys are brutally accurate and beefy as shit. And I died several times in this kill room, where enemies attack from above and in front of you with Gauss rifles, and there's barely any cover at all. So I had to turn down the difficulty to even survive. And fuck this gank room. But once past, we finally reach the X7 lab. and we enter the pod room that Strelok shot up all the way back in Shadow of Chernobyl, where Strelok then puts the Heart of Chernobyl artifact in the central tower and activates Kamenov's unused pod, and he enters. And a cutscene triggers, and we finally see Skiff's face as the pod fills with dubious green liquid, and his mask is fucking gigantic. At least he won't be spreading any germs. Once Strelok has been podded up, Skiff then leaves out the door, and we hear Strelok's voice, and it seems that he has taken control of the zone, essentially becoming the S consciousness now, I guess. And when we leave, the Monolithians stick us up, about to John Marston my ass. But then, Strelok orders them to stand down, and they obey completely, and he now has full control of the monolith. Strelok then orders a complete lockdown of the zone, vowing to kill anyone who tries to leave or enter the zone. And Skiff tries to walk out of the zone, but finds the entrance sealed off by anomalous force fields, and we hear Strelok's final words, vowing to protect the zone, no matter what, and that being the Strelok ending of Stalker 2.
Я захищатиму її завжди.
Now this is just one of 4 endings, as the game has a Spark/Scar ending, a Ward/Korshinov ending, and a Kamenov/Skiff ending, and they go as follows. In the Scar ending, Scar is the one who enters the pod, and we use the cartridge instead of the Heart of Chernobyl to activate the pod. Skiff then wakes up in a beautiful poppy-filled zone, much like Strelok at the end of Shadow of Chernobyl, and we see our friends gathered around a campfire, and even people who died are here, like Star, who died blowing up the Duga. So it seems like we finally found the shining zone Scar was looking for. But then, the camera then flips under the ground, and we find that Skiff is just sitting alone, in a dark and shitty zone, surrounded by bodies, the shining zone seeming to be just an illusion in his mind. And in the Ward ending, Korshinov enters the pod, which knocks out Skiff, who then wakes up to the Lady Agatha, who gives Skiff a box containing a key to his new Circa-provided house, and Skiff leaves on a chopper to go home, deciding not to become the next Korshinov, as he'd rather go home and play PC games, I guess. And as we leave, we see the anomalies collapse, and the zone seems to have been destroyed, and it looks all very normal out there. And indeed, the zone has been destroyed, or rather is now fully under the Ward and Circa's control, because we see a screen looking through Skiff's eyes, along with hundreds of other screens, heavily implying that Circa now has a Stalker program-like control over select people now. And we also leave the unknowable power of the zone and the amazing technology of Project X in Circa's hands, so who knows if that's a good thing or not. And finally, there's the Doctor/Skiff ending, where if instead of killing the Doctor, you spare him. And if you do, you get the last ending, where Skiff himself enters the pod, and we see zone scientists pick up readings that anomalies are popping up all over the world. And it seems we finally set the zone free like the Doc wanted, but now the zone seems to be covering the entire planet, making a real zone for everyone just like he said. And we then see the Doctor himself, who walks, takes off his cloak, and reveals himself as Faust? How's that possible? I'm pretty sure I shot that guy to death, but nope, here he is. And he says, "Gotcha, bitch." And Faust says that the zone provides true freedom for all people, and thus, it must be given to all. But I have no clue how Faust and the Doc swap places like that. But we also learn from a flashback that if you decide not to kill the Doc, he's the reason that Project X failed and created the zone in 2006, as he shot up the X7 device as the experiment started, which ended up creating the zone. And Skiff essentially completes his work by making the zone go worldwide. And we also see those classic Shadow of Chernobyl cutscenes from the Doc's perspective this time, where Strelok shows him the heart after his excursion to the center. It's pretty cool. So the choice is yours. Join Strelok to protect the zone and ensure its existence, even if that means Strelok essentially turns the place into anomalous Gitmo, and Skiff can't leave anymore, and Monolithians are still brainwashed killers, just under new management. Or do you join with Scar to find eternal peace in the Shining Zone, where death itself cannot even touch you, and you can live your days in peace in the beautifully lush and glowing zone? But in reality, the zone is just as deadly and shitty as ever, and you now exist in a sort of zone matrix, shuffling through the real world while geeked into the next dimension. As for the Skiff/Kamenov ending, a worldwide zone could work, if the worldwide zone was not as dangerous as it is in the Chernobyl zone, but rather being a sort of oasis full of helpful artifacts that heal people, make them smarter, extend life, and so on. Because humanity would be fucking cooked if the worldwide zone was just as dangerous as the Chernobyl one, as most people would not be built to handle the dangerous anomalies, the mutants, and the survival of the fittest, lie, cheat, steal, and kill lifestyle that comes with the zone. And lots of grandmas will be getting blended up by those vortex anomalies, or your stupid chud son would get ganked by Tushkanos on the way to school. And I think that could get ugly real fast. Also, if Kamenov was Faust, then who do we kill at the Duga? Is Faust a real person? Or is he some sort of anomaly unto himself? that can somehow take on the appearance of other people. Was the Dr. Faust this whole time, even in Shadow of Chernobyl and before that? Or can the Doctor just make himself look like other people? Who knows? Maybe that's a question for an expansion. I have no clue. I'll have to think on this one. And as for the Ward ending, I'm sure this woman who knows way more than she should can be trusted with all this amazing technology and psychic power. And surely they won't fuck up this time and create a zone that's even worse and more dangerous. Trust me, guys. But with that, that's the story of Stalker 2 complete, which although can be pretty meandering at times, as well as just overall confusing with who's who, what technology does what, and who exactly Faust is, and so on. But I was happy to find that the story became deeper and more interesting the more you got into it. Going from a not too interesting hunt for a stolen scanner, to a conspiracy to bring back Monolith, to the reconnection of the Seek consciousness, to killing a human controller, learning the truth of why Project X failed, and then choosing a side in the fight for the zone's very survival. And it presents you with some interesting choices on who to side with and why. And each character and faction has a good reason to support them. And no ending is the clear-cut good ending, letting you decide what outcome will be best for the zone. Control of it? An ideal illusion of it? The complete removal of it? Or the uncontrolled expansion of it? And it also presents a lot of cool new concepts to the zone's lore and secrets. Like what the hell is even going on with Faust's zone energy dimension? And hopefully, we can see what future expansions have to offer. Because I want to know what was going on with that guy in his glowing zone. And just how the hell he was the Doctor this whole time. Along with some other things. Like what exactly Cold Island is? And I hope we go there for a DLC or something. But with that, despite all the technical issues, the unstable at best frame rates, goofy bugs, and missing to straight up broken features like A-Life 2 and Stealth, I think Stalker 2 is still a really special game, and it's a small miracle it even came out. The in memorandum section for this game is over 100 names long, but the world's angriest chimpanzee can't stop a people who have a passion for their series like this, and it came out with such a great sense of scale and scope. This game genuinely surprised me with its size and interactions available, and just how easy it is to burn 50 hours playing this thing. It's a huge game. Despite the issues and the unfinished features, this is still an easy Game of the Year contender for me, and I can't wait to start a new playthrough after a few updates and some mods to make the experience even better, and I hope Stalker 2 sticks around for a long time. But, that's all I got for today, and if you're still watching, thank you very much. Metro Exodus is next, and soon, so watch out for that, within the week, and I love you all. Goodbye.